All right, everybody, welcome. We're here or we're back. Today, we're just having a very, I think, straightforward conversation, to be honest. I think there's a lot of confusion and gray areas and stuff out there about sales in general, sales specifically. One of the biggest things that I've had an experience of is bringing on a full-time salesperson recently. And I can say with a ton of confidence that somebody who knows what they're doing doesn't rely on a tactic, on a system, on a process, on a sentence you're supposed to repeat 6 times to make everybody agree with you. And like, it is a huge misunderstanding out there, in my opinion, all the way from lead to conversion to sale. It is a big gap, again, just my opinion, in terms of how much the match between who you're talking to, what they want, and why they're there in the first place. And I'm being this vague right now because, this is where I'd lean on Rob, but I don't think anything I've said changes whether you're talking about dealing externally with customers or internally with your team members.
Yeah.
It's just as consistent across the board for this kind of stuff. Appreciation as a sales strategy works for both your team and your customers. It's the core of revenue architecture. And that's my favorite thing about it, is everything's actually measured by not our clients, but the impact on the lives of their customers. And I find if you're not focused on that, you don't plan on being here a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, because it's the customers who pay the bills, keep the lights on, keep you and your team employed, and keep things moving forward.
Yes. And I think that that's something you've hit on, something really poignant that I think a lot of people miss. I had a mentor who said that business is the privilege of helping other people solve their problems. That is what doing business means. And if you are in a B2B context, and I apologize if you hear road noise in the background, I'm in a hotel lobby next to a big old busy road. But in this context, in a B2B context, their problem is like, it's actually, you have to take it a step further and solve your customers, like solve their customers' problems as well. In the sense that, like, you're creating a channel that makes it so that they can solve their customers' problems better or faster or cheaper or in greater volume, right? But if you can't tick off the box in one of those areas, then you haven't really, like, you'll lose that customer. You haven't actually solved their problem.
Yes. Yeah, we're dealing with that right now with the supplier, to be honest, right? Like, we've got a platform that we provide services through, and they did an update at the same time that a client onboarded, and there's something wrong with the integration of their payment processing, because for 30 days now we've been reaching out to support, and support's been like, well, just tell them to like delete their credit card and add it back in, which is like 2016, like unplug and plug the modem. And
have you tried turning it off and turning it back on? Like,
yeah. And as if we haven't done that and sent you screenshots and stop asking for a Loom video of the fact that it still is a problem. It's inside the software.
Right.
Now go fix it from your end. Right. But like that's an impact, because again, we're their client, but our customer is the one suffering. And it seems like they've forgotten about that annoyance, because without that, we can't complete a few other things that have to be done, because the system to plug this and that and the other end wants to like charge $1 to make sure it's connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole project has been put to a complete halt. Right? Forget the emergency brake. The car is now up on blocks. There's nothing we can do. Wheels are just spinning in the air.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and it's just it's an impact issue, right? It seems crazy to me that companies are willing to just let this happen and let their team default to not problem solving, to just like,
Yes, and this is the benefit and the curse of being educated. And I mean this in the best way possible. Uneducated people, not inexperienced people, but uneducated people don't have the blinders of academia put on their eyes.
right,
Educated people are sort of trained to approach problems from a very specific perspective and from a very specific solution set. And
right,
so, like, they come in and they are looking at, oh, if this is your problem, this is how you solve it. If I'm in a business, right, in MBA school, this is what you're taught to do. You know, this is how you solve this problem. But it removes all of the, for lack of a better term, soul from
right,
business, right? And so it's like, what's the whole point of making? Ooh, this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example. So I don't know if you are familiar with the Reese's peanut butter cup controversy that's going on in the United States right now.
no,
So, okay, so Hershey's chocolate,
okay,
they bought Reese's peanut butter cups like a long time ago. And over time, they've changed their recipe. So it no longer has chocolate, it's chocolate candy, which isn't chocolate. It's like a fake chocolate. And then they
okay,
don't have peanut butter, they have peanut butter, it's like peanut spread or something like that. So it's all fake. It's all fake.
right,
And the grandson of the guy who started the Reese's peanut butter cup, he's like, he wrote a huge excoriating post on X about this to Hershey, and
right,
it's this huge controversy. But the example is Hershey cared more about cutting corners and saving costs on the Reese's peanut butter cup than they did about the customer experience. And now this Mr. Reese is not the only guy who's complaining about this. They have national not icons, but like media personalities and celebrities who are all complaining. Yeah, Reese's peanut butter cups taste awful. They taste nothing like the original Reese's. Like what's going on? And it's like actually actively hurting Hershey's at this point. And
right,
that's my point, right? Is Hershey's is doing everything that would textbook be correct according to business school, right? You go in, you cut costs as much as possible, you operate efficiently, you increase utilization as much as you can from bottleneck resources, marketing, all of it, textbook. But it's missing the soul, and it's taken the soul out of the Reese's peanut butter cup, which is a classic American candy.
right. I think a lot of consumers feel insulted when a bait and switch happens.
Oh, absolutely, they do.
I, spent more than a couple decades in Vancouver, and it's interesting how we get numbed to this, but because of the cost of labor and materials, I knew people who were responsible for making the show suites for condos, high rises, all that stuff. And then
Yeah.
the finishings, by the time the build is done, would have changed. Will have degraded 2 or 3 levels, right, to fit within the deposit that people made to get the thing that they bought that they didn't actually end up receiving.
Oh, wow.
Right, and it became normal, because I don't know what you can do about it after you paid for this thing. I guess like spend whatever you have left on taking them to court. But yeah, it's just one of those things, and that is probably one of the biggest pieces of the attrition rate that we see in the onboarding space, right? They always cut that 30% in the middle and say half those leads shouldn't have been there in the first place because all that outbound buyer intent, mismatched ICP, if there's one at all, before they even enter the sales process, just leads to a series of disappointments because what's being sold isn't what's being provided. Right. And the new problem child to point the finger at, because there's always another one, is of course AI, because it's being sold as magic beans and requires a high level of configuration and then a high level of oversight for it to work at all. This is why MIT had that study where I forget what the number is, 85% of AI deployments fail or something. That's because it's not being deployed properly. I had a meeting with another gentleman earlier this morning who said the exact same thing about CRMs. 85% of CRM deployments fail. But it's also because they're not being configured properly. And I guess the point of that conversation is these things have been around for 2 decades. So how come we haven't figured it out yet?
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it comes back to not putting things in the right seat of the bus. And I don't typically use that analogy, but I think that it's accurate in this case. Mm-hmm. Because I think that if you put the right thing in the right seat of the bus, everything would stay prioritized the way it should, right? If Hershey's put the customer and care for the customer front and center like they claim they do, then they wouldn't have changed the formula for the chocolate. They wouldn't have changed the formula for the peanut butter. Right. And so, yeah.
Well, and how hard is this? Like, we make commercials about this stuff that are a joke now, of like flavor testing and like I forget which one I'm remembering because it's been a while since I watched TV, but it's everybody in the white lab coats and being like, dip this, dip that. So we know that happens. So how hard would it have been to send out 100 packages of type A, 100 packages of type B, and a QR code that said, please vote?
Yeah.
Right? Not challenging. Like, I'm dating myself, but I think we already went through this with New Coke. I'm really sure about it.
Well, and New Coke is interesting because like New Coke even messed with people's identity.
Right.
And that was like crazy. I think that, you know, the customer recognition side, just adding on to what we've been talking about, has to be more than just, you know, putting the customer front and center in what you do. But when customers do things that you appreciate, like holding them up as a paragon of what you would want other customers to look like or be like.
Right.
You know, and this is where case studies actually can go a really long way, right? If you have a case study that brings someone in and says, this is Steve. Steve's an average Joe, but after drinking my mushroom coffee, Steve turned into Superman and he saved Lois Lane. And it's like, okay, you know, that's Steve's a really cool guy. I want to be like Steve. And it's like all of a sudden Steve feels seen and heard. But not only that, all of the people who are like Steve feel seen and heard. You know, in the Middle Ages, and this is I don't even know why I'm saying this. This is so weird. In the Middle Ages in theater, they used to have a type of character called everyman. And everyman's job was to literally be the placeholder for any average person and to just respond the way that any average person would respond in that situation. And we still have that type of role in modern theater, but it's not even in modern like entertainment, but it's not called everyman anymore. But like most heroes, when you see them go on the hero's journey, they start out as the everyman. Very rarely are they like, he's super special from birth, right? Like
Right.
it's more like Harry Potter didn't know that he was special. He just thought he was average, and he is pretty average. He just happens to have this one really interesting thing about him.
Right.
And I think that look at the sensation that Harry Potter became. And I don't think it was entirely due to the whimsy with which J.K. Rowling wrote the books. I think it's because everybody saw themselves in those books in
Mhm.
one way or another.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. And I think that's the thing, right? Like there's an accessibility here. If there's anything that made those characters lovable, it's the fact that they didn't know what they were doing, right? Which
Yeah.
gives us all a little bit of reassurance because, especially in terms of like growing up and then finding your place in the world and then doing stuff, we don't know what we're doing.
Right.
And like admitting that kind of humanizes us. And to get back to that being a part of sales, that's one of the things that I'd say is really important to appreciate. Right? It's like, hey, we're both here in the room and we're here to figure this out. And I don't know more than you. Like I know certain things, but I can't assume I know everything about you because if I did, there'd be no reason for us to talk. Right? And if you had this all figured out, you wouldn't be looking for a solution.
Yes.
Right? But it does require a certain conversational level of capacity. I was scoping a deployment for a client earlier today, and I listened for some really key things. And like what I love about this company is they are so customer centric. Right? He's like, I'm super interested in the web version and this thing and that thing, but I don't want this thing involved with our phones at all because we pick up the phone after the first ring and everybody in my company knows that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what an amazing thing to do. Let's never replace that. Let's keep that high human touch the way it is and never change that because, that's part of why people know, like, and trust you, period.
Yes.
Right. And he was concerned that to get B, he had to take A as well.
And I think that that's the lie that people tell you, right?
Right.
And that's just to beat a dead horse. That's the lie that Hershey's fell into,
Right.
with the Reese's peanut butter cup, right? Like you can have superior customer service, you can have superior customer recognition, and find ways to reduce costs. But at some point, you have to make a deal with the devil if you want
Right.
to cut costs even more. And that deal with the devil will impact your ability to retain your customers. And it will impact your ability to even properly see your customers because you have to start believing in a lie that quality no longer matters. And
that's the thing right there that you're touching on, because for some reason it seems to be acceptable to let quality degrade while
yes,
prices go up.
yes. And that's like, well, and I think that's like part of the big question, right? Is like, what along the line convinces someone to believe in that lie? Because, with your example that you just brought up, the owner of that company was very clear. We answer the call on the first ring every time. That's the expectation. And everyone on my team is aware of it.
Yes.
And there are costs associated with that, right? And at some point, if he were to change that, he would have to start believing in this lie that is okay. That although, or put a different way, that we can change out humans answering it on the first call for an AI answering it on the first call, and that it won't impact quality, right? Like there's some weird trade-off that happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very weird trade-off. And again, the norm of like, it's going to get worse, and we just expect that to be the case. I
Yes.
don't know how people come to accept it, but again, I saw it time and time again in the Vancouver housing market, right? And it wasn't anything that people complained about any longer. They just knew it was going to happen, which is the part that seems crazy.
Well, and I think that people do know, right? Like I live in a housing market that is absolutely bonkers. Like if you looked at the what is it, the Case-Shiller index, we'd be like 600%,
Mhm.
600% or something, just nuts. And we just recently did something we do every year in our community called the Parade of Homes. And it's where builders will pull out all the stops for this one home. This home is meant to showcase all of their skill, everything that they can do with their subcontractors. It is like everything. And we have hundreds, well, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 people who come through our community to look at these homes. Just massive amount of people. And one of the things that was interesting to me is I was talking with one of the guys who worked as a subcontractor. And I was asking him, so tell me about these different contractors. And he was saying, I would not trust a single contractor in this community to build my home. And I said, why? Isn't that's damning?
Wow.
And I said, why? He
Wow.
said, because I get to see behind the curtain and I see everywhere where they cut corners.
Yeah.
And that's, it's like you're talking about. It's like there is this disconnect in the mind of these companies where it's like, I can cut this corner here. It's a lie that they believe, right? I can cut this corner here. It will not affect overall quality. But it's like Clayton Christensen said, it's
Yeah.
easier to believe in something 100% of the time and to do it 100% of the time than it is to believe and do it 98% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I just to keep throwing the same topic under the bus, I saw the development of the Olympics and the Athletes Village. It was built, 8 blocks from my home. And it went up fast because that's how it works and that's what happens with the Olympics. And every tradesperson who worked in that environment said, do not buy any of these places.
Wow.
Because of the same reason. They were put under a really tight deadline to come in at budget and were forced mostly by the timing to cut those same corners.
Yeah.
Right. And like quality of workmanship, like by default had to go down. And housing is one of those things, like you're not buying it worrying about your 5-year warranty or 5-year problems. It's the 10, 15, 20,
Yes.
50-year problems that you have to face.
Well, 100%. And I think that this goes back to recognizing, right? So it would be very easy for us to look at this and look at the word recognize, which is in the title of today's episode. Look at that word recognize and think that it just strictly means like giving someone recognition in the eyes of the world through an award or through like, putting publicity their way. But recognition has multiple meanings. And it's like, this is a computer mouse. I recognize that it's a computer mouse based off of very complex neural wiring, but also through a lot of personal experience. I look at that, I'm very intimately acquainted with this is what a computer mouse looks like and this is what it can do. And I think that what we've really done in this episode, which is really interesting to me, and I hope the audience grasps this, is not the first as much as it is the second. That we're saying To recognize your customer means you have to understand who they are. You have to see them from a 360-degree perspective, understand the outcomes they're trying to create. In a B2B context, the outcomes they're trying to create for their customers, right? And help them deliver on that in order to improve your retention. But that also means protecting your quality tooth and nail and being willing to take those hits because it's the right thing to do, and recognizing that my customer, were they here, would advocate for keeping the quality, right? Like
Yes.
this is a very different approach to customer recognition than I think you will get anywhere else. And so I hope that our listeners and our viewers are catching this, because this matters. This matters a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I go back to kind of the RevOps map, retention happens before expansion.
Yes.
And that gets missed a lot of the time too. Right. And I know you're familiar with the term, I hope everybody else is too, but there's this thing called churn, which is acceptable customer losses. And like, that's the one thing I don't like about that term. By definition, it's the acceptable amount. We expect to onboard this many people and lose that many. And if you don't fix that, you certainly can't expand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because acceptable is a word that requires context for definition.
Right.
Right? What is acceptable attrition in D-Day is not acceptable attrition in Vietnam.
Right.
And so, like, acceptable is such a wishy-washy term in this case, because the fact of the matter is all attrition is unacceptable. All attrition is unacceptable. And here's what I mean. Let's say, well, you might be saying, well, Zach, what if you had a fit that they had one expectation of the solution and they thought that their problem was A and it really turned out to be B? Well,
Right.
that was your fault as a company. You didn't do a good enough job vetting and qualifying them. You should not have sold them the product in the first place. No customer retention no customer attrition is acceptable.
Right.
Some of it is understandable, but it's not acceptable.
Agreed. Yeah, that's a great way of distinguishing it. So, as we start to kind of wind this up, I guess some of the things that I think are the most important, in my opinion, absolute key, is recognition, first of all, right? If you don't go looking for things, you won't see them or be able to find them. And once you understand how important it is to recognize things, you'll start to see patterns, right? And the patterns, what is it? There's an Archimedes quote I heard the other day, which was, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum to put it on, and I can move the world.
Yes.
And there's so much leverage inside some of these patterns if you just look for them. Right? The tiniest changes can make the biggest differences if there's enough attention put on them. If the fulcrum's put in the right spot, then like magic can actually happen.
Can I give you an example of this just very briefly?
Yeah, please.
I worked with a software company, and they were low 8 figures, and they couldn't keep customers. They had a huge churn problem. And part of it was the product. Like, the product wasn't great. It wasn't super stable. So when we talked about, did you try turning it off and turning it on? I listened to the support calls. Half of them were, hey, you're just going to have to clear your cache. Like, that's literally,
unplug it and plug it back in, Zach.
Yeah. That was it. And obviously that's very annoying for customers. But they said, Zach, we need you to fix this customer retention problem. And so I started calling these customers, and I noticed a pattern. And it was, they had unresolved tickets, and they would answer the phone and they would say, are you calling me to tell me you fixed my ticket yet? And I'd say, well, no. And they say, okay, call me back then. Click. Right. And so what I started doing is checking to see if they had outstanding tickets. And then I'd call them and give them an update on the ticket. And, what we figured out was that a lot of these customers were leaving not because the product wasn't stable, although that was a driving factor, but it was because they weren't getting support tickets responded to, not solved, just responded. And so by just responding to these support tickets, and having a customer support team where it was their job to just say, hey, I'm going to interface for you as you have these tickets, and we'll make sure that we get them resolved in a timely manner, but I'll keep you updated on a regular cadence. We improved customer retention by 14.7% in 12 weeks, and we cut delinquent accounts by 53% in that time frame. Wow. Those small changes that you're talking about. Hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if I actually responded to the support ticket? It's a teeny change, but it literally ended up being hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for this company in non-lost revenue.
Right. And the little hinges swing big doors stuff comes to mind, right?
Yes. Yes.
Massive results from small, focused effort, tiny changes. And that's maybe, the biggest lesson of this entire conversation. If there's anything I'd say for people to think about, it would be go looking for that stuff. Be really curious, be really interested. Don't assume you have everything handled, because there's an overwhelming amount of stuff out there. And our brains turn off. What is it? How many different data points our brains actually manage at any given time versus the 3 things we can remember, and I can't find my car keys.
Or in my case, I can't find my phone.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing to really focus on. Anything else you want people to think about and remember?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that this is the last part of recognition. Recognizing that the customer is a human and not something that you can manipulate. I think that a lot of the problems that businesses fall into when they start believing those lies is that they fundamentally believe that that their customer is someone that they can manipulate and that they won't be resented for that. I guarantee you people resent Hershey's because they changed the Reese's formula, right? People resent Facebook for the way that it's manipulated them into believing certain things. And that resentment does not go away very easily. And so if you ever find yourself thinking, oh, my customer is too stupid to understand this, or I can get away with this or that, you need to take a long, hard look in the mirror, because you're entering dangerous territory, and it might not happen today, but you are entering a slippery slope that will destroy your business.
Very well said. Very, very well said. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for your time today, for unpacking this with me, and just being willing to kind of go to bat on behalf of the customer. I think a lot of companies are focused on growth and leads and all this stuff. And again, that post-transaction, what's going on over here, where customers are, where lifetime value is an afterthought. And it's going to cause big problems in the long run if it's not attended to.
Yes.
Start today.
100%.